All right, everybody, time for yet another episode of the Red Delta Project podcast and live stream Q&A here on the Red Delta Project YouTube channel. As always, Matt Schifferly, founder of the Red Delta Project, where we help you focus on a fundamental approach to fitness, which gives you more power, control, and freedom in your healthy lifestyle. As always, my books that I've written are what support this channel, as well as other resources like NOS suspension equipment, WorldFit, isometric equipment. There's links down below in the description to all of those as well. So let's get right on to today's topic, which is the three biggest, I've said in the post on Instagram, time wasters. So though technically these aren't time wasters, it's very hard to waste time when it comes to exercise because everything does something, but nothing does everything at the same time. No, these are the three biggest habits that I see people engaging in time after time after time. And while they may not be a complete waste of time, they are these things that have a very high cost to return ratio. And in the last episode, I talked about how motivation is all about an emotional balance sheet. It's about the amount of effort you perceive you're putting into your exercise and your workouts versus the return and the benefit that you are getting. And typically, these three things offer a very high amount of effort and investment on your part, but they don't really bring much reward in. So it kind of tips that emotional, motivational balance sheet a little bit and can compromise your motivation. So it's not just about wasting time. And a lot of times people are like, yeah, but if I'm still getting effort into, I'm still putting my work into it, it's still going to be worthwhile, right? Not always. It's certainly possible to bust your tail like crazy and get very little return on it, which is what these three habits are. Also, on a side note, these three things are mentioned in my latest book, Micro Workouts, which also just barely came out in paperback. So it's now available in full book form for those who are interested, because a lot of the approach of micro workouts isn't just about doing quick workouts and doing things as quickly as possible. It's also about removing a lot of the stuff that takes a lot of time to do that really isn't bringing you much benefit. So let's jump right on in. Number one, the biggest time quote waster that I see people making is too much redundancy in their workouts, particularly strength training workouts. What I mean is that they end up doing like 5 or 6 different exercises for a tension chain or a muscle group. And while these exercises are technically different, they're not that different. And one of the things we always want to make sure we understand about our workouts is every rep, every set, every exercise in addition that you do throughout your workout carries an exponentially higher cost to you, cost to your nervous system, cost to your energy, cost to your time, cost to your lifestyle, cost in general. So if you're doing more and more and more, that's not saying that 10 minutes of exercise comes at a cost that's half as much as 20 minutes. 20 minutes is more than twice the cost of 10 minutes. Yes, it is twice the time, but you're spending exponentially more energy that requires more recovery. So this redundancy, let me give you a classic example, right? This is what I used to do, honestly. I used to do, when I was lifting weights, I used to have a weight bench in my home gym that had different degrees of incline, right? I had 2 degrees of decline, flat, and then 3 or 4 degrees of incline. And I do 3 set 10 at every single setting that bench had. So decline, slight decline, flat, slight incline, 90 degrees, and then fully upright. I did 3 sets of 10, every single one of those on bench. Then I would do the same thing again, but with dumbbells. So I had all this volume, but ultimately I'm just pushing my hands away from my torso. On a fundamental level, I really wasn't changing all that much different. Is it different? Technically, yes, but it's not really different enough to really be worth all of that extra work. I mean, it'd take me 2 hours to go through the whole workout, right? Things changed a lot when I got into combat conditioning, and it was like push-ups. Full stop. That's it. You're doing push-ups, a couple variations and stuff maybe, but basically that's it. And this is one of the reasons why I often recommend do one major compound movement per tension chain. And if you want to add extra exercises, that's perfectly fine, but make sure they're different enough that they're not too redundant. If you're just changing your hand position or your hand width, or you're leaning forward just a little bit, making these small little adjustments, you're not really doing that much that's different. Your muscles aren't really making that much change from one exercise to the next. So your cost is going up, 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 but essentially you're just kind of running around in circles, just beating a dead horse to death. So that's why instead of doing 20 different pull-up variations, I would say do a major pull-up exercise that you feel strongest with. And then if you want to do something else, change something major about what you're pulling with. Change the tool, go from like bands to dumbbells or calisthenics to a machine or something like that. Change the speed, go from really slow to really fast. Go from bilateral to unilateral, where you go from using one arm to two arms or vice versa. You can also change very much the angle. Now, going from a flat to a slight incline, not enough of a difference to really be worth it. But going from vertical to horizontal, or my favorite is vertical downwards and vertical upwards, that's a big enough difference to be worth it. So instead of having 20 different exercises that are all basically the same thing, like 15 different curls, you don't need 5 different curls. You just need one, right? Instead of all that redundancy stacking up, do 1 or 2, maybe 3 different exercises, make them as different as possible, still involving the same movement pattern, and you'll get much more value out of the time and energy that you are spending for that. All right, point number 3, where people are spending or almost wasting a lot is in, quote, fat burning exercises. Now, in my book, Micro Workouts, I talk about this, how you have much more efficient ways to address exercise for the sake of performance and exercise for the sake of building muscle. You can make that very efficient. But when it comes to the section where I talk about exercising for the sake of burning fat, my recommendation is to do nothing whatsoever. Like, take the whole notion of working out to burn fat right out the window. Now, it's not to say that you don't burn fat and calories working out. Of course you do. It's doing something separate and specific for primarily trying to just burn fat and calories. Because a couple of things. One is there's no shortcutting around this one. Our bodies just don't burn calories all that fast. So the only way you can possibly burn a significant amount of calories is to spend a lot of time being physically active. There's no possible way. I know a lot of people on my burpee video where I question the validity of burpees, people are like, burpees burn fat. Unless you're doing it for like 90 minutes, even 5 minutes. If you tell someone to do burpees for 5 minutes, that's a long time to do burpees. But there's no way in hell you're going to be able to burn a substantial amount of calories in only 5 minutes. It's impossible. There's just not enough time there. So when we are looking at doing exercise for the sake of burning calories, what this usually means is we've got to do a lot of something. Usually it means cardio, but it means just a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And we just go and go and go, which is why I recommend don't even bother with it. Don't even bother with, I need to do this to be leaner. I need to do this to burn fat or anything like that. Because remember, a calorie burn is a calorie burn no matter how it's being burned. There's no such thing as fat burning exercise. That's because any physical activity, even me moving my arms like this, increases your rate of caloric expenditure. You don't need to do anything special. You don't need to do anything specific. Whatever you're doing for the sake of performance, for play, for recreation, for building muscle, any other form of activity you're doing for any other reason is still just as effective as just running around doing nothing on a treadmill. Now, it's not to say that I discourage people doing more activity for the sake of burning fat and calories. I had a couple the other day say, Matt, we're looking at possibly buying a couple of exercise bikes because we get home at the end of the day and we're just sitting there watching TV and we want to watch our favorite programs, but we figure if we get a couple exercise bikes, we'll be on our bikes burning fat and calories where we'd otherwise be sitting down. That's not at all what I'm talking about. That's a great idea. I love that. It's doing an exercise and taking time out of your day, time you would rather be spending doing other things, energy you would rather be using for other things, just because you think you have to do it in order to either lose weight or stay lean. And the reality is you don't have to do it. You don't have to do that stuff at all. In fact, because you burn calories and fat doing anything else you like, so you might as well do something else. And of course, don't forget the other half of the equation, which is diet. Lots of people who are doing fat burning exercise and stuff to stay lean are actually just burning off calories that they're eating. And the reason why they're eating it is because they're doing the cardio, and they're doing the cardio because they're eating it. This is what I call the cardio trap. I also address this in my book. And it basically just sucks the life out of your daily habits. It costs you time and energy and money, and it leads you absolutely nowhere. So that's why I'm a big fan of taking the whole notion of working out for the sake of weight maintenance right out the window. Say work out for the sake of fun and recreation and building muscle and health and 100 other reasons, and you'll just burn calories anyway, and that'll take care of you as long as you're keeping your diet in check. And last but not least, number 3 on my list of the biggest time and energy time sucks, not so much wasted, but they just suck away so much of your time and energy, is of course long, tedious, unnecessary warm-ups. I know some people who spend more time warming up than they do actually training. Back in the day when I was a taiko drummer for Burlington Taiko, we had 90-minute classes, and we would spend literally the first 45 minutes of that, quote, warming up with various push-ups and calisthenics and all sorts of exercises. And I thought that was how taiko worked. Like, you've got to do, hundreds of push-ups before working out and everything. Much to my surprise, when I went and I studied abroad in Japan, the birthplace of taiko drumming, and I joined a taiko group when I was there. And the first day there, I started doing my warm-ups and my push-ups and everything. And they looked at me, they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" I was like, "I got to warm up." And they're like, "Warm up? You're here to drum." Boom, put a drum in front of me, hit that thing. That's your warm-up, right? And the fact of the matter is, a lot of us are warming up in very ineffective ways. So not only is it taking a lot of time and energy, it's not even working very well. Now, this is the one I get the most pushback on, because a lot of people say, if I don't warm up, then I'm worthless. I'm going to hurt myself. I'm not going to be able to do my workout. But here's the reality of the situation. Our bodies, by nature, are designed to be action ready right off the gate. You shouldn't have to warm up nearly as much as you think you need to be active. But it is somewhat necessary these days. Full disclosure, I fully agree with you. But it's not because you need to warm up to get ready to exercise. You need to warm up to recover from being sedentary, because you've been sitting so much, because you haven't done anything for the past 3 days. It's going to take a lot for your body to get into a groove where you can start pushing it. So you're not warming up and doing your stretches and foam rolling and spending 20 minutes running on the treadmill and everything for the sake of getting ready to exercise. You're doing it in order to recover from not doing anything for the past 2 or 3 days. And that's why I always recommend, instead of that, doing movement habits, patterns every single day throughout the day to keep your body somewhat action ready. And this is something that I've adopted myself over the past several years, and I barely need to warm up at all for any kind of workout. Now, that's a big difference from where I used to be. I used to be the guy who needed 40 minutes of warming up just to throw a full speed sidekick in Taekwondo, because I was always tight, I was always sore, I was always stiff, and I was never ready for any kind of activity whatsoever. Coincidentally, I was also playing a lot of video games at the time and doing almost no physical activity outside of my Taekwondo classes. So like a lot of you out there, I thought I had to do these long warm-ups in order to get action ready. But if you engage in things like overhead reaching, deep squatting movement patterns, twisting, just little things like that on a regular basis every single day, then you're much more action ready to go. Plus, when you do warm up, because sometimes it is appropriate, you want to make sure your warm up is applicable to the activity you're about to do. You can run on a treadmill and foam roll and stretch your legs out all you like, but you're nowhere any more ready to do pull-ups than when you just walked into the gym in the first place. You have to warm up for 3 reasons. One is neural recruitment. So you want your nervous system to ramp up. And this particularly entails anything you're doing with a high amount of intensity, lifting heavier loads, sprinting, that sort of thing. And the best way to do that is to start with lighter intensity of the very activity you plan on doing. So that's neural warm-up. That's why I'll do some rows and then some pull-ups before doing weighted pull-ups. Okay? And again, that shouldn't take you very long, 5-10 minutes max. The other reason to warm up is metabolic ramping up, right? That's why I did a lap of the race course every time I did a mountain bike race, because I knew that if I showed up and just started cold, my metabolism wouldn't be up to par and I'd crash and burn on the first lap. So getting your metabolism ramped up for activity that's going to have a high metabolic demand also makes sense. once again, you want to be doing lighter versions of the very activity you want to be doing. And then the third reason, of course, like I was mentioning before, is loosening up and just kind of getting things ready to rock and roll. And if you have some of those daily movement pattern habits, that's not nearly as important, but sometimes you're just a little stiff, you're a little sore, you're a little bit out of sorts and stuff, in which case big things that involve big ranges of motion, deep squats, reaching up overhead and stuff will take care of you. And again, none of this should take more than 5 minutes or so at a stretch, and then you're ready to rock and roll. So those are the three biggest movement or time wasters that I often find people engaging in the gym. I no longer do any sort of long, tedious warm-ups. If I do anything, it's very specific to what I'm going to do so I can ramp up. It takes like 5 minutes. I no longer do redundant exercises. If I do extra exercises, I make sure they're as different as possible. So that way I'm getting more stimulus for my investment. And I no longer do any sort of exercise purely for the sake of burning fat and calories. I do things because I like to do them, because I am trying to improve performance, build muscle, 100 other reasons. The fact that I'm burning calories is just the added bonus, but I don't do anything specific anymore in order to maintain a lean physique, especially since I can keep my diet in check. So there you go, folks. Let's jump into some of these questions here. But before I do, I want to ask you a question. Specifically, what would you think about having this podcast at an earlier time in the day? Probably something like around mid-afternoon or so, I'm thinking here, Denver time. And I ask this because I've been getting a lot more people saying, I can't quite join on the podcast. I'm in Europe, I'm over here, I'm on the East Coast. It seems like a lot more of the RDP community can't partake in this podcast right now because of the time that I have. It's even somewhat late for me, 7 p.m. here in Denver. So if you just leave me a little thumbs up or down or something, or a yes or a no in the comments to let me know if an earlier time kind of works for you. I know I'm asking the people who can make it now, but I want to get kind of a feel on if that's going to be a step in the right direction. All right, so let's get to some of these questions. Thank you so much, everybody coming all on. It's very much appreciated. And again, if you put, hey, Matt, in the first line, that I know that's something addressed to me and not something you're just conversing with one another. First question, hey, Matt. When I was shoveling snow the other day, I felt it mostly in my back muscles despite trying to use my legs. I think it's because my lower body is fairly tight. Any advice? It could be tightness, but it's probably more due to some activation patterns. There's so many muscles in the back of the body that are typically under-engaged: hamstrings, glutes, calves, and then even parts of that, like your upper hamstrings, lower hamstrings, how your upper back is as well. Excuse me. The upper back you do want to have working, but I'm assuming you're meaning the lower back. And if that's the case, then yeah, when the lower back is super tight, it means that everything below the waist isn't working as it should, or above your lower back. Maybe shoulders are up. Very common with shoveling, because your shoulders kind of come up as you drive the shovel forward and you never get them down and back. So I would look at, are you packing your shoulders down and back? And when you stand up, are you leaning forward? Or are you able to get your hips back? And again, with shoveling, your weight's kind of shoveling forward, thrusting forward, your weight's on the ball of your foot. You're probably not in a good hinge position. You're more like bending over rather than hinged. And if you're not hinged, yeah, you're going to feel it in your lower back. Outstanding question. Shoveling is one of those real gut check kind of exercises that really tells you how fit you really are. Al Painter in the house. Al, it's always good to talk to you. By the way, everybody, Al and I are coming out with a new podcast starting on Friday, if I can get it up in time. We are starting a new at-home fitness podcast, and basically it's called Fit at Home, and it's all about tips, resources, and ideas on how you can maximize your fitness at home. So I'll be letting you know about that on the RDP Instagram and everything like that, but keep an eye out for a brand new podcast from Al and I. Anyway, Al says, hey, Matt, but I love the kickboxing cardio games, Pilates X class. What do you mean it won't burn fat? Absolutely. This is addressing the fact that there are a lot of ideas out there that say this exercise burns fat, because it's the easiest sales pitch to make. Like, do this, burn fat. Now, again, even that phrase, burn fat, It sounds great, but it's ultimately meaningless because that's always going on. You're always burning fat. You're burning fat watching and listening to this podcast right now. Keep in mind that everything in fitness is about taking physiological processes and either speeding them up or slowing them down. You never make anything happen when you exercise that isn't already happening in your body 24/7. So when you're physically active in any way, shape, or form, you're taking your metabolic process, which uses fat and calories and sugar and all that kind of stuff, and it's just speeding it up. You're not turning anything on. You're not hitting any sort of a switch. You're not making something happen by exercising a special way. You're just taking the processes that are already happening and always have been happening and speeding them up by being active in any way, shape, and form. Excellent point there, Al. Zabe in the house. Hey, Matt. Based on adapting a minimalistic approach to training, if you can only commit to 2 times a week from a consistency perspective, can you still do micro workouts or would you up the dose? No, I mean, twice a week is perfectly fine. And keep in mind that the dose can be very much dependent upon how often you want to train, how often you can train, what your schedule is like. It can be very flexible. There's no reason to stick to a very dogmatic, only do this twice a week, only do this once a week kind of thing. If you want and can do more, then go for it. And if you need to scale back and cut back a little bit, then you do so at those times as well. But you bring up a great question because the micro workouts for this week and next week are actually part of a 2-part micro workout split, upper lower split, that you can easily adopt into a weekly format where you have upper one day, lower the next day. And you can definitely do those one each week. That's at least something. And it's not hard to do each one twice a week or even 3 times a week if you like. So check out the new micro workout for this week. It comes out every Monday on Micro Monday. But twice a week can definitely work very well for a lot of muscle groups. In fact, a lot of people find they do better on that because it gives them more time to recover, and because they're not doing a lot of volume, that they can put a lot of intensity into that as well. So that's one of the benefits of it. Give it a shot and see what you like there. All right. More people on in the house. Clark Road, always good. Very, very good. Kimberly, it's so good to talk to you again. Hey, Matt, any good intermediate oblique exercises that don't require tons of upper body strength like the human flag? Absolutely. I'm a big fan of the Russian twist, actually, and where you're sitting on the ground and you lean on back and you twist side to side. Now, the big mistake I see people making with that exercise is they use way too much weight. I used to see a guy at the gym where he'd sit on one of those sit-up benches where you lock your legs in, which is never a good idea with that stuff, and lean back with a 45-pound plate, and he's twisting back and forth, and everybody's like, oh, I'm just waiting for his spine to snap. It's not the way you want to do it. You want to do a flat floor, keep your feet either off the floor or on the floor, but free. You don't want to lock them down at all. And you just twist back and forth. And if you hold anything, it's got to be real light, 3, maybe 5 pounds. You can adjust it by how far you twist, how far you lean back, and how far you can reach your object out. But my all-time favorite is the suspension strap Russian twist. So what you do here is you get in the same position. You have suspension handles or foot straps just above the floor, and you put your palms in the straps. You press down with straight arms. And then you rotate back and forth. It kind of looks like you're doing one of the, dabs that you see on social media that was trending like a year or so ago. But that, when you're pushing down, fries the hell out of your obliques. And it's very safe for your back as well because all the support and pressure is in your hands, not in your lower back. Very highly recommended. QZ. Hey, Matt, I like to do push-ups, but when I do it from rings or suspension, then my arms get chafed. Any tips or solution? Thanks. Salute from Belgium. Excellent. Fantastic. I know it's late there in Belgium. Thank you so much for watching. This is a very common issue, but it's an issue that is a good canary in the coal mine to know if your arms are actually in close enough to your body. A lot of times when I'm coaching people doing push-ups and stuff, get your arms in nice and close, people are like, yeah, they're close. And it's like, is still not nearly as close as you think. Plus, it's also about your shoulder blades too. If your shoulder blades are up and forward, your arms are naturally going to wing out a little bit, and you're going to get that chafing as well. So there's a lot of different things going on here. Your shoulders aren't packed enough. Your arms aren't in tight enough. There's a chance that the suspension straps or the rings that you're using are too narrow of an anchor point. So if it's a single anchor point design like a TRX, that's really kind of hard to do without kind of getting too much external rotation in your arms. Hopefully you're using a dual anchor point setup like the ones over at Nosk. And you have them not at shoulder width, but little tiny wider than shoulder width. The way that I was taught to set it up is have your arm, like your elbow, to your hand, and then one hand width. That's usually a good place to go. I like it a little wider than that, in fact, but make sure those anchor points are wide enough. So if your shoulders are packed, your elbows are in, so your forearms are physically rubbing against your ribs, and it's a little bit wider than your shoulder width, you should have no trouble with the chafing. Fantastic question. Gaga Flow in the house. Hey, Matt, any advice on staying positive after an injury? Very good question, because a lot of times after sickness and injury, that's where it really affects us, is in the mind or in the heart as well. And I'll give you the same advice that I gave someone who asked earlier this week on the Instagram channel about how to get back into working out after suffering COVID, which is where I am right now as well. My energy level is super low and has been for months. And it's the same thing from an injury. You do what you can with what you have. I know your abilities are going to be suppressed. That's the way it is. That there's nothing you can really do about that. You're going to have a limiter on your body for the next however long it takes to heal, right? And a lot of times people are like, okay, so how do I get around it? How do I still keep maximized with this injury? The answer is you don't. You don't have a race car pull into the pit crew and say, my tires are flat. How do I still go max speed? No, you don't. You simply can't. So in this case, what you're doing is you, instead of looking at maximizing your capacity in your workouts, because injury and illness decrease your workout capacity. But capacity and testing your capacity is not the only way that you can make progress. You can also make progress by improving and testing your proficiency. Your proficiency of how well you can do the exercises or how well you can do things that don't involve the injured area. And that will keep things moving forward, because it's one thing to say, well, just do what you can and keep moving and be active, and that's all good. But we don't want to even fall back. We want to still make progress. We want to still be moving that needle forward. So when we get out of the injury, we're still in better shape than when the injury even occurred. So that's what I recommend doing, is don't worry too much about pushing your capacity too much in your workouts, but your proficiency in how well you're doing things, like the advice I was just giving about those push-ups, making sure those shoulders are packed, elbows are in, all those sorts of things are ways you can improve your push-ups. So if I'm doing push-ups on rings, due to my recovery from COVID, I'm not going to be setting rep PRs on push-ups, but I can improve how well I'm doing those push-ups. And that's going to allow me to blast out those PRs when I do fully recover from this thing. So proficiency rather than capacity. Very, very good question. Chris is in the house. It's always good to talk to you here, Chris. Hey, Matt, got a family member who tested positive for COVID. Oh, just speak of the devil. Should I not train as hard right now because that'll weaken my immune system? I am getting tested tomorrow. I mean, right now, it's 24 hours. I don't think you're necessarily going to do that much. I do know that when I really push myself with capacity testing workouts, it can hit my immune system. There are times when I have really pushed my workout capacity and I get really tired and then I get sick, because basically it did compromise my immune system. Your immune system does require a lot of energy. That's why we get tired when we're sick. Your immune system is using so much energy, you don't have much energy for other things. So you can definitely scale it back a little bit. Since we're talking about a 24-hour period or so until you know the results of that test, I would say work out as normal. But if you're feeling like you're really running into the red line, stop it right there and recover as best you can. Make sure to get plenty of sleep too, Chris. Best of luck. I hope the test comes back negative. Oh. All right, Zabe. Very good to talk to you. Hey, Matt, any tips on how to lose weight fast? I have 6 weeks to lose 6 kilograms. I'm 96 kilograms, 6 feet, and probably 30% body fat. Well, it's probably not coming from much from fat. You're going to lose a lot from water here. I mean, fastest weight loss will always be from water, pure and simple. Really decreasing the amount of carbohydrate in the diet, make sure sodium intake is relatively low and stuff. Basically just trying to get rid of some water, especially in the last week or so. There's a lot of other articles on the internet on this one that know a hell of a lot more than I do about weight loss. That's never actually been in my field of expertise because I've never needed to lose weight. Losing body fat, totally different topic, okay? But people who like wrestlers and stuff who need to lose weight, make weight and stuff, that's not really an area I'm very well known in. So when it comes to needing to make weight, refer to things you would find on the internet for that, because I'm not the guy to ask. I've never really cared about how much I physically actually weigh, except for back in my bike racing days. And back then it was basically just don't put on any muscle and just cardio myself right into the ground and be as skinny as possible. And you can still find images like that of me when I was 150 pounds back then, basically because you want to be as light as possible when you're a bike racer, so you can go up the mountains as quickly as you can. But as always, if you're looking for fat reduction, look to the diet and get rid of the luxury calories. So don't drink anything with calories in it. That includes health smoothies and protein shakes and all that kind of thing as well, because yeah, I know it's healthy, but it's still a calorie bomb. It's still a sugar bomb, and it's still a processed food bomb. Regardless of what it is, it's a processed food. All liquid calories are processed calories. So that's the stuff that is probably the easiest to take out of the diet that can make the biggest dent. Make sure that you're not eating to the point where you're past full. Eat slower, so that way you fill up on less food. And yeah, that's where I would go for now, and try and snack as little as possible. Make sure that the calories that you're getting in are as impactful as possible. Whole foods, real fruits, vegetables, protein sources, that's what you want to be focusing on. 6 kilograms, 12 pounds, it's going to be tough. It's like roughly 2 pounds a week. Can be done, but it depends on where you're starting from. Like if you're already following much of this advice, then it's going to be an uphill battle, my friend, I'm afraid. But when people come to me and they're like, I need to lose weight, and they're drinking a 6-pack a day and eating nothing but fast food, it's pretty easy to drop weight fairly quick when you're coming to it from those sorts of habits. Zarati Karate in the house. Always good to see you, Avatar here. Hey, Matt. What's your experience on bodyweight tricep extensions? Do you recommend it for optimal gains for triceps? I freaking love them, man. They're one of the few quote isolation exercises I practice. I love doing those things on suspension straps, particularly on towels and stuff. I've got a couple of videos on the Red Delta Project channel. If you search for triceps, you'll probably come up with them. I've even got a new tricep extension that I do on straps, which is just brutal on the triceps, because triceps, we not only have to straighten our elbow, but it's also about shoulder engagement as well. And this new version is both. And the first time I did it, I could barely move my arm the next day, even though I was just playing with it. I didn't even push it that far. Doesn't automatically mean the exercise is effective, but it does mean that it used the muscle through a very big range of motion. So absolutely love them. I put them at the end sometimes of dips or push-ups just to give it a little cherry on top of a push chain workout and grind style calisthenics. Oftentimes I combine it with some chest flies if I just want to get a little bit more in the chest as well, but fantastic exercise. And on the suspension straps, it's very easy to adjust too. So it's extremely hard or easy depending on what you are after. Samurai Panic, always good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on again. Hey, Matt, is there an optimal diet for grind style calisthenics? Any thoughts on keto or carnivore diet? I actually addressed this in the book on grind style calisthenics briefly. At the end of most of my books, I put a question and answer area. And basically, it boils down to the healthy eating strategies that I always recommend. Follow your 3 Ps. Okay, so at each meal, you're mindful of your plant, protein, and portion size. And as Michael here on the channel will attest, like the 3 Ps, that alone will probably take care of about 80% of all your diet and nutritional needs for the rest of your life. Just following those 3 things. Make sure at every meal you have a protein source, a good plant source, and portion. If you want to gain weight, eat more. If you want to lose weight, eat less. Basically, that'll take care of most of everything you're ever going to need. Aside from that, you can apply that to any diet you like. You can apply it to any eating style. You can use whatever foods you want. No rules, just do what satisfies your 4 appetites the best. Typically, when it comes to dietary trends, things like the paleo, carnivore and stuff, I would use those just as much as I'd drive a horse and buggy to work every morning. I look at things like that as basically obsolete, antiquated ideas that have no more any place in modern living. As once you have an understanding of fundamental healthy eating and apply those basic principles, that stuff becomes obsolete garbage. It has no place whatsoever in my life. I don't recommend that stuff whatsoever, largely because a healthy diet is about what you do eat and why you're eating it, not about what you're not eating. And that's the biggest reason why most trendy diets are colossal failures for most people, because they tell you what not to eat, which is the worst premise to base a healthy diet on, because you're not healthy because you avoid certain foods. You're not going to be healthy because you don't eat rice or you don't eat chocolate or you give up coffee or something. You're not automatically healthy because you avoid whatever they say is bad because of some sort of pseudoscience or bro science they're following. You're healthy because of what you are eating, the benefits it brings you, and the choices that you are making and why you're making it. That's the path to a much healthier diet, way easier to maintain, and you don't have to bother with that stuff anymore. And like I said, I don't bother with that stuff any more than someone saying, hey, Netflix is out. How about buying my VCR? No, it's obsolete. It's garbage. No, I don't want that stuff anymore. I had a lot of time with that stuff. I don't want to go backwards. Thank you very much. All right. Kevin in the house. Hey, Matt, is calisthenics good for improving in daily activities like carrying shopping bags? I feel my forearms and shoulders really weak when I carry bags. Absolutely. In fact, that was one of the things that kind of told me that calisthenics had a lot of viability in, quote, daily functional ideas, because I got into calisthenics back in the day when I used to deliver home exercise equipment. And the thing about delivering things like treadmills and weight machines and stuff is everything is heavy, nothing has handles, nothing is easy to carry, and you can't carry things in a very stable position. You're always like lifting the treadmill as you're going up a spiral staircase while the dog is running around your ankles, and you got to make sure not to bump into the wall with the painting that they bought for $2 million and the White House wife is yelling at you and everything. It's the hardest carry job there is. It's like being a mover, but only for heavy stuff. So calisthenics is very good for that. So if you ever notice that there's a weakness cropping up in your daily life, like your grip or something like that, well, there's plenty of calisthenics exercises that can mitigate that. So for example, your grip, any pulling exercise will be a good grip exercise. But always remember the most fundamental premise of functional training is you gain that which you challenge. So if you want a stronger grip, do things that challenge your grip. Particularly handy are things like grabbing a set of towels and doing towel hangs off of bars, like Paul Wade talks about in Combat Conditioning 2. I always like doing towel rows, so I'll loop the towels through the foot loops of a suspension strainer or gymnastics rings and do rows like that. Very good for the grip training as well. Or you could just simply wear heavy gloves when you're training. Heavy winter gloves and stuff, hang on a pull-up bar like that, works your grip super hard, and that grip will no longer be a weak link. It will, in fact, be a strong link for you, and it won't be much of an issue going forward. All right. Next one, Fernando. Hey, Matt. Have you seen Dejan Stipsk? I can never pronounce his last name. He does a much better job. 20-year transformation. You heard of yes, I have, of course. What are your thoughts on him? I'm glad you asked. He is a specimen. That is the only way I can describe him. And I highly recommend people find that video on his transformation, because there is so much unbelievably good, valuable information to learn from his example. The first of which is, I'm always saying, is because he's just a beast, a monster of muscle mass and supreme strength. Is very, very inspiring. Definitely in the top 1%, maybe even 1% of 1%. Very inspiring. But there's a couple of things you have to take away from his transformation video is one, he's a great example of the benefits of starting training extremely early and building a lot of neuromuscular proficiency at an early age. So when he started his physical training, he got into gymnastics. He's got images of him doing stuff on gymnastics rings and stuff. And one, he was very good at it right off the bat. So he has a natural ability, which means his neuromuscular proficiency was very high to begin with. So he had a much better foundation for building muscle at strength at the age of 10 than most people probably will by the time they're 40. Okay, so he basically was like, if we were running a marathon, he's at mile 24 before we even get off the starting line. So he's already ahead of us because of his first 10 to 15 years of training in gymnastics. Then when he decided, okay, I'm going to apply gymnastics for building muscle, he had this foundation which was so strong that he was able to build muscle incredibly fast, a lot of muscle extremely quickly, and a very impressive physique at that. You look at his proportions and everything, it's gorgeous. It's a wonderful physique, very good proportion with the upper body and the core and torso and everything like that. But that's an example to apply in that area. Now, a lot of times when people ask me questions like, how come I'm not building muscle and stuff, they'll look at that and say, how come I can't get those kinds of results? It's like, unless you started in those circumstances and you're like 30 years old saying I can have trouble doing push-ups, you're not even in the same league. That's like comparing your touch football club with, Tom Brady and the Patriots at their peak. Like, it's not even in the same league. You're not even in the same ballpark. So this is where some of that comparison really goes off the rails, because what I do and what most people do are nowhere even close to what Dejan can do when he was a teenager. The other lesson that I like from him too is he's got his own demons. He talks about in his video about how he was building muscle and strength and everything, but then he kind of fell off a little bit and he had some partying issues, I think he was drinking a little bit much. I can't quite remember because it's been a while, but he's not perfect. Like, he doesn't come from a perfect background, a perfect life, a perfect motivation and stuff like that. He's human, just like the rest of us. And he's been able to overcome his challenges and obstacles and succeed despite them, which is a lesson we can all take to heart, because too much in our fitness culture, we've got this idea going around of, I'm only going to be successful if everything's perfect and I've got everything going for me all the time. But he never had, nobody has. And yet he still overcame them, which I think is a very inspiring example as well. So those are some of the things that I picked up from that. I think it's very fun to watch, very inspiring stuff. Definitely highly recommend checking him out on social media and so on. All right, moving on. Robbie 10, hi Matt. Have a sharp pain in my left wrist when I do pull-ups, dumbbell curls, body weight rows. I saw a video of yours, however, is focused on pain and push-ups. It's similar, but different, yeah. I'm okay with push-ups. What should I do? Get it checked out. Find out what exactly is causing the pain. Whatever I give you for advice is a pure random guess. I might as well shake a magic 8-ball because I don't know. It could be some sort of an injury. It could be something, there's a nerve in there. Something's not rubbing quite right. It could be a number of things. But 10 minutes with like a physical therapist, if you can get in person with one, will probably identify what it is and they'll give you some exercises for it right away. So that's one of my blanket recommendations. Don't try and diagnose pain on the internet. You're guessing at that point, and any advice you get is a guess. In-person healthcare, there's never going to be a substitute for it. All right, more questions here. Samurai Panic again. Hi, Matt, what's your absolute favorite superset exercise? Oh, good question. Oh, I don't do a whole lot of supersets these days, to be perfectly honest with you. Usually if I do back-to-back exercises, it's something as a finisher and grind style, or I'm doing more like an isolated thing. Like I said, the chest flies and the tricep extensions. That I would say is probably one of my favorites. I typically do straight sets of the big compound stuff. Although, actually, no, I stand corrected. The past several weeks for my leg training, my favorite has been to superset dumbbell lunges with suspension sissy squats. Murder for the quads, absolute murder for them. Love that one. Suspension sissy squats. That's an exercise, as far as I know, I invented it. Probably not everybody's done everything already, but the suspension sissy squat is a little different from the classic sissy squat. Much easier to regulate the resistance level on it, give you a little bit more support. Basically, you face away from the anchor point, and you have your hands on the handles straight out in front of you. So when you squat down, your hands go up overhead. Keeps you honest about the amount of resistance you have for that. Really good for the quads. Then you do dumbbell lunges, getting as much weight onto your front leg as possible. If you can, doesn't take a whole lot of weight, and that just fries the hell out of the legs. So satisfying. Outstanding superset. Thanks so much for asking. Man, hey Matt. How do you incorporate alcohol into a healthy diet? Outstanding question. I actually covered this in an episode or video on the RDP channel quite a while ago. I was very proud of that thumbnail. I made it look like it was full of beer and everything. Well, with a lot of food, alcohol included, a lot of it just comes down to rate of consumption. The ability to have a certain outcome from a particular food boils down to how quickly are you consuming it. Okay, so as I always say, everything in fitness is about speed. It's about speeding up or slowing down something, right? So when it comes to alcohol, if you have an unhealthy consumption of it, you're consuming it too fast, too much per day, too much per week, too much per month. So if you want to get to a point where you're consuming a more healthy way, slowing down your consumption. This is one of the reasons why I always recommend people who have trouble backing off on the booze and they're trying to lose weight or be healthier, of having a superset back and forth with alcohol with water. And what that does is it doesn't just water down what they have in their belly or anything. It's because it slows down their consumption of alcohol throughout the night. If you have 10 drinks and they're all alcohol, that's a lot of alcohol in the night. But if you have the same amount of liquid throughout the night, but half of it is water, you've now significantly slowed down your alcohol consumption. So with that said, I know a lot of times people are like, oh, do vodka, it's low carb and everything like that. Don't get lost in any of that stuff. It's not going to automatically be healthy because there's no carbs. Alcohol technically is classified in many ways as a straight up sugar. It's like drinking straight soda pop in many ways. People forget about that a little bit, but they're like, there's no carbs. And I'm like, yeah, your body treats it as something that's worse than carbs. It's a literal poison, which is why I don't drink a whole lot, but I do drink. I do like to drink. For me personally, I usually have 1 or 2 drinks. If I have 3 drinks, that's a wild, crazy night for me, but I've never been a drinker. I've never been someone who drinks a whole lot. I had my first drink when I was 22. I had my second drink when I was 24. And even then it was half a beer. I remember I drank half of it and it just sat on the counter for a couple of days before I threw it away. I've never been much of a drinker, so that's one of the reasons why I can consume alcohol relatively healthy, I guess you can say, because for me, I make sure that when I do drink, it's well worth it. It's back to where we were saying about the exercises, where if you're going to add exercises, make it really worth it by making it different. So when I drink a beer, one of my favorites is like IPAs and stuff, it's with my friends after a day of mountain biking. I got a good friend of mine I go mountain biking with, and almost every time we go mountain biking, we go to Golden City Brewing over in Golden. Fantastic beer, and we have a beer afterwards. But it's with my friend after mountain biking. That's when it tastes the best. That's when I enjoy it the most. I don't just have a bunch of beer in my fridge that I just drink randomly, willy-nilly. I drink when I find it's the most enjoyable and pleasurable and most worth it. And that's what I recommend for things like beer, but also ice cream, but also other, quote, bad foods, is make sure you're consuming it in such a way that you're getting the most benefit from it. Because again, that's the mark of a healthy diet. It's not about avoiding foods. It's about consuming foods for good reasons. And you can consume almost anything for a good enough reason, but you want to make sure you're consuming it when you're getting the most benefit. If I'm just bored and like, I don't know what to do, Saturday night I'm alone, I'll just watch a movie and drink a few beers. If I drank seltzer water, it would feel the same thing to me. But when I'm with my friend after mountain biking, I sure as hell don't want seltzer water at that. I want an IPA, and that's what I'm going to drink at that time, and that's when I'm going to get the most enjoyment out of it. So there are my thoughts on that. Fantastic. Everybody's coming great. Wonderful questions here. Thank you so much, everybody. One more from Samurai Panic. Fantastic questions coming from you, man. Thoughts on creatine? Creatine's great, but there's a lot of non-responders out there. I've played around with creatine plenty of times in my life, found nothing. happening. A lot of people don't respond to it very well. I had a buddy who actually worked in the supplement industry, and he told me that roughly 1/3 of people are just non-responders to it. He's like, well, 1/3 of the people, nothing's going to happen. Creatine, though, is probably one of the safest, one of the cheapest, and one of the easiest supplements to include into your program. So that's why I always tell people, if you're curious about it, go for it. But don't go for like the designer creatines and all this stuff you see out there. Regular creatine monohydrate, it's like $12 for 6 weeks worth. It should not break the bank. You see these things that are stacking things, and it's like $80 for a tub and stuff. Don't bother with that. Because then if it's got 20 different ingredients, you don't know what ingredient's doing what for you. If it does work, you don't know what's actually the active ingredient. Regular creatine monohydrate, just take a spoonful of it a day. If you want to preload it, you can do that with some orange juice, 3 or 4 spoonfuls for about 3 or 4 days. See if anything happens. 30% chance, nothing. 30 more percent chance you might find a little benefit, and maybe you're a hyper responder. There are those where they take creatine, they're like, whoa, holy smokes, I feel amazing. Hopefully that's the case for you. Give it a try, and best of luck with that. Greg Duvier, hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly there, Greg. Hey Matt, is there any benefit in doing a neutral grip pull-up over a supinated grip pull-up? Yeah, a lot of people find the neutral grip work is pretty good. There's actually a really good article on T-Nation. There was a gentleman who was, the name is escaping me. It might have been Charles Statley, the legendary strength coach, but I'm probably just pulling that out of thin air. But he was talking about how if you want to take like a powerlifting approach to your training, he was like, a lot of people, the bench, squat, and deadlift with the barbell is not the best fit, and it's more injury prone over time. So his whole approach was get everything to be neutral grip. That was his whole premise, is have neutral grip, push, pull, and a squatting motion. And his recommendations were neutral grip pull-ups, dips, which are typically neutral grip, right? Weighted if you like, and then trap bar work, because that's also neutral grip for your squatting and deadlifting variants right on that. And I think it's a very good way to go about it, especially if you're someone who's just kind of prone to injuries or just got a lot of miles on your joints and stuff. Including more neutral grip work is probably a very smart thing to go. And no, you're still bending your elbows, you're still getting your biceps and everything like that. Make sure you get tension in the muscle. Still a very viable exercise. Fantastic question. Kevin coming on once again. Hey, Matt, what's your opinion on pre-fatigue sets? Pre-fatigue, it's one of those things that in the research that I've come across, it's always just hit or miss kind of thing. Like people are like, it's great. It doesn't really do anything. It's good. It might not be that beneficial. It's all over the place. So from a research standpoint, I don't really have much of an opinion on it. However, from an experience standpoint, AKA the bro science, which still has a lot of validity if you ask me, I think it's freaking great. I love it. I think it's a very good way to just kind of wake up a muscle. Just tonight, I was working with a client and she has issues with her hamstrings when she's squatting and stuff. So I was like, all right, we start with the hamstring work. And we got her on the TRX and TRX hamstring curls and hip extensions, just light up those hamstrings, not just because it's pumping the muscle up or because it's working the muscle or pre-fatiguing, just because it's turning the damn things on. Right? So then when she went over to her lunges and her squat movements, her brain was already used to using the hamstrings. So her squats and lunges were better because she got that engaged. So I like pre-fatigue, not from the sake of pre-fatiguing the muscle, but to get the muscle engaged and used and warmed up. And then when you go to your compound movements, people are like, oh, it's working more because it's pre-fatigued. Yeah, it's also because your brain is more engaged and that mind-muscle connection is a hell of a lot stronger, which makes it more effective for that exercise. So if you're ever struggling with a particular muscle group, I definitely highly recommend it for sure. All right, fantastic exercise. Greg in the house. Oh, these questions, fast and furious, everybody. Fantastic. Hey, Matt, have you ever thought about doing online coaching? I have, in fact. I have actually done some. I've had some people just call me up or write me up, email and stuff and saying, hey, can you do some coaching for me, and we'll do a Zoom call or something, and I can Zoom you some or Venmo you some money or something. Like, yeah, sure. It's not something I make too public, although I guess I just did, largely because it's something that can take a lot more time and commitment than people realize. But if anybody writes me an email and says, I want to do some coaching, I'm like, okay, let's rock and roll, sign this waiver, and we can make it happen. But it's not really an official program as of this point. It is kind of something I'm looking to add on potentially with the Grind Style Calisthenics program. That's the second month of that just came out on YouTube. You can just find that. That's a free program. That's on the RDP YouTube channel. It's just go into the Grind Style Calisthenics tab, and there's the program with the downloadable PDFs and everything that you can check out. But I'm hoping someday to be able to take that program to be a little bit more of a polished thing. And as an add-on to that would be some online coaching as well. Thank you very much for the question. David Baker, hey Matt, have you ever tried Nordic curls on the hamstrings? Those are extremely difficult for me. Yeah, I'll bet. Nordic curls. To be honest with you, I haven't really tried them very much, largely because a lot of people I see doing them, they struggle with them, or they do them as negatives and they're pushing off the floor and everything. And two, as someone who's suffered a lot of knee injuries and knee issues, you're literally grinding your knees into the ground. I know there's a pad underneath you. People put an Airex pad under the knees and everything. But to me, it just still looks like you're grinding your knee physically into the ground when you do it. And you're overloading the hamstrings because it's too much resistance that people can do it very well, that they have to use their arms for support. And that's why I always just recommend the TRX versions. TRX hamstring curls, plus you have hip extensions. And the reason why I like the TRX version is because it involves your entire extension chain to a very high degree. It's not just your knee flexors or your hip extensors, which your hamstrings need both, but it's also your spinal erectors and all of the other muscles along your extension chain as well. So there's a lot of ways you can progress them as well. You can add weight to them. You can make them real easy. You can make them real hard and everywhere in between. They've just got a lot more versatility. They're a whole lot easier. And in my opinion, they're just the better way to go. Granted, that is an opinion without a lot of experience with the Nordic hamstring curls. So as I always say, an opinion without experience is just a guess. So that is my guess. But right now, I'm most comfortable giving that recommendation to people. And that's the one I'm giving to you as well. But hey, what do I know? Give them a try, because once you experience them, you may find they're the best thing in the world after a next couple of weeks of doing them. But if they're frustrating you, try the suspension hamstring curls instead. Seek Truth Now. Hey, Matt, should I add volume, more sets, or should I add weight vests? Is one better in your opinion? Basically, we're talking about time or tension, because fundamentally, that's what your muscles have. You have how much tension is in the muscle and how much time is it there for. Those are from a strength and particularly hypertrophy standpoint, those are the only two variables you've got. All of the exercise options that we have out there are basically changing either time or intensity. So you're asking, is it better to add intensity or time? My opinion, preference, intensity. Go for intensity. Now, that's not to say that adding more volume isn't beneficial. However, refer to the beginning of the podcast where I talked about every rep and set you do, in addition with your workout, is a diminishing rate of return with an exponential increase in cost. So as you're adding those sets, your benefit and your return on those sets is going down, and the cost to your nervous system and your recovery and all that is going up. But with intensity, it's a little bit of an inverse. When you add intensity, you typically get more bang for your buck with exercise. Now, that's not to say intensity is the number one thing. Like you could just go to a super heavy weight, lift it once and be done with it. I actually knew a guy who would do that on the leg press. He'd stack up all the 45s in the whole gym on this thing, unrack it and move it like 2 inches and be like, there, I'm done. And it's like, you didn't do anything. It's like all that weight. It's like, no, dude. So you need some volume, of course. So that's usually 3, 4, 5 sets is the happy medium where people feel they're getting the most. But once you start adding a lot of volume to it and you're just kind of getting through it, you start to dilute that intensity, form starts to break down. Bottom line, add intensity. And there's more ways to do that than just weight vest too. You can also adjust your resistance through technique as well. But intensity over volume is my general recommendation. All right, let's see if we got one more question here. I'm sure I missed a couple people. Sorry. And also, folks, with potentially moving to an earlier time and stuff, if you want a question answered on this and you can't make the podcast, but you're going to listen to it later on the playback, and also remember all the audio of these podcasts are published on podcast platforms, but you want your question answered, leave it in or DM me Red Delta Project Instagram, and I'll be able to get to the question in the podcast or just right then and there. Let's see, one more. I know I missed one. Here we go. Chris. Hey, Matt, what's your favorite progressively overloading exercise, and what are your current numbers, and what's your goal for it this year? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've been doing the dumbbell lunges a lot more lately. It's just kind of gotten into the works. I started doing them a few weeks ago and really happy with how they're feeling. I'm using 30s for that right now. Pretty modest weight. I'm really just working on the technique, getting as much weight on that front leg as much as possible. Basically, when I do lunges, I treat them as single leg squats. I want my back leg as little involvement in the exercise as possible. What that also does is it means you need a lot less weight as well. So I would say that's my favorite loaded exercise right now. I've been doing more of the weighted pull-ups. That's been holding pretty steady at about 30 pounds or so. Although, unfortunately, ever since coming down with COVID and this chronic fatigue that's been driving me crazy since mid-November, I've backed off a bit on the weight because my work capacity level is low. On a good day, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at a 5. So I'm not basically, I'm just trying to get through the workouts and get as much as I can out of them. But I would say the lunges are probably the answer for that one right now. All right, one more time. Okay, we got everything in. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. I know it's late for many of you. Let me know again in the comments if you think an earlier session in the day would be good, or if you prefer this time still. And as always, the live feed is 7 p.m. on Denver time here for the time being. But you can also watch the replay on the RDP YouTube channel and, of course, the audio through your local podcast directory. So thank you so much. As always, check out the links down below to help support the channel on the sale of my latest books, Micro Workout, Grind Style Calisthenics, and so on. And I will talk to you guys next week. Till then, be fit and live free.